There is a tomb so enormous, so engineered, so dangerous, that even today, with radar, lasers, and micro-robots, archaeologists still agree on one thing: do not open it. Because inside lies the most mysterious imperial mausoleum ever built, and its secrets might just rewrite human history. Welcome back to Hidden Lantern Chronicles. Tonight, we descend into the forbidden world beneath Mount Yi, the resting place of the first emperor of China, Emperor Qin. This is not just a tomb, it is a city for the dead, the largest, most complex, and the most perfectly sealed mausoleum humanity has ever attempted. And despite the decades of scientific investigation, 5 mysteries still guard its silence. Firstly, is the hill truly hiding a buried metropolis underneath? Second, why choose Mount Li and why face east instead of south like other emperors? Third, which legends are real? Mercury rivers, starry heavens, deadly traps? 4. How did they build this massive underground empire? 5. With modern technology so advanced, why do experts still refuse to open it? Tonight, we follow these 5 mysteries, one by one, to understand the greatest unopened door in human history. Let's begin with the hill itself. From a distance, Qin Shi Huang's tomb looks harmless. A gentle tree-covered mound that tourists photograph in seconds, but the numbers tear that illusion apart. Mausoleum zone, 56.25 square kilometers, larger than many modern cities. Formal cemetery area, 8 square kilometers, about 1,500 American football fields. Outer city wall, 6.2 kilometers in circumference. According to the Hanshu, the mound was once over 50 zhang high, a man-made mountain rising 115 to 120 meters into the air, covered with trees and grass to resemble a natural peak. More than 2,000 years of rain, earthquakes, and human cutting have shaved the mountain down by nearly half. So what we see today is only a shadow of what once towered over the plains. Around this artificial peak, the inner and the outer walls form a Hui-shaped layout, the same structure as Qin's capital Xianyang. The mound sits slightly to the south, like the palace core of a buried city. Hundreds of pits surround it in all directions. Terracotta armies, stone armor, acrobats, animals, ritual sites, stables, chariots. This is not a grave. This is a capital, a city built for a ruler who intended to rule in death as firmly as he did in life. But why build it here? And why make it face east against imperial tradition? Most Chinese imperial tombs follow a simple, powerful rule. Sit north, face south. South is the direction of authority, warmth, and the throne. However, Qin Shi Huang's mound sits on the west side facing east. Archaeology confirms this is not an accident. Among hundreds of Qin tombs excavated in Shanxi, the vast majority follow an east-west orientation. In one major royal cemetery, all 32 large tombs face east. So why is this stubborn east-facing pattern? 3 major theories compete. Firstly, immortality and the eastern seas. Qin Shi Huang famously sent Xu Fu and groups of boys and girls eastward, searching for the Isles of the Immortals and elixirs of eternal life. Xu Fu never came back. One interpretation, since he couldn't reach the eastern isles of the immortals in life, the first emperor chose to face east in death, hoping the gods or immortals would finally guide his soul there. Second, conqueror of the east. Qin was originally a western state that rose to conquer the 6 eastern kingdoms. A tomb facing east can be read as a permanent, silent boast, the emperor's dead gaze fixed on the lands he once crushed and unified. Third, Qin ritual seating custom. In Han etiquette records describe the honored seat as often sitting in the west facing east. If in life the ruler sat in the west looking east over his court, then in death his tomb would logically preserve the same orientation, an eternal throne facing an eternal audience. This matches the systematic east-facing burial habit seen across Qin burials, from nobles down to common graves. And why Mount Li? Earlier Qin rulers like King Zhaoxiang and Guangxiang were buried around Ziyang to the west. Qin Shi Huang changed the pattern and moved east, to the north foot of Mount Li. Ancient and modern ideas suggest several reasons. Symbolic resources. Old records say the north slopes of Mount Li are rich in gold and south slopes rich in jade, precisely the materials linked to the power, wealth, and immortality. Geomancy and engineering. Mount Li is a branch of Qinling Mountains, offering a strong back. The mausoleum faces Wei River Plain, opening toward farmland and the heart of the empire. Waterways were rerouted to form a kind of protective embrace around the site. From above, hill lines curl like paddles around the mound, a natural lotus with the tomb at its heart. Now that we understand where and how it is placed, how did they actually build an underground empire of this size and complexity? The classic story goes like this. Qin Shi Huang became king at 247 BCE, and immediately began tomb construction. Work continued throughout his life and slightly beyond for almost 39 years. Over 700,000 laborers were conscripted, a mix of prisoners, convicts, and drafted civilians. Modern archaeology sharpens that picture. The most intense construction likely began after the unification of China in 221 BCE, once the emperor could command resources from the entire country. The core of the mausoleum, the main mound, palace belt, and underground palace was probably constructed in a focused burst around 219 to 213 BCE, about 7 years of high-intensity work. Tools, pottery, and evidence show craftsmen coming from all 7 former warring states, pulled into one gigantic imperial project. The chief architect Li Si only held the right power and title after unification, which supports the idea that true large-scale construction started then. So what exactly does that underground city look like, and what did they hide at its core? Archaeologists divide the mausoleum into 4 major zones. The underground palace. The central burial chamber and its immediate complex directly beneath the mound. The inner city surrounding the mound, halls, courtyards, sacrificials, buildings, altars, the palace district of the dead. The outer city, stables, gardens, warehouses, and official residence, everything a functioning capital would need. The outer zone, cemeteries for workers, brick kilns, stone quarries, and administrative compounds, the industrial and logistical backbone of the project. North of the mound, in the inner city, 3 big palace groups form a funerary palace belt. Elevated halls with surrounding corridors, stone floors with drainage systems, wells, stoves, tools, tiles, weapons, ornaments. Ancient written records say Qin Shi Huang created the system of a sleeping palace by the tomb, which the Han inhabited. In other words, his tomb wasn't just a hole in the ground, it functioned like a palace where the emperor still lived, with daily offerings, food, and ritual care. Modern drilling and geophysical surveys show the underground palace is directly under the mound, not buried deep into Mount Li itself. Structurally, it's a vertical pit surrounded by a massive rammed earth palace wall. Walls up to 30 meters high and several meters thick, built from countless thin layers of tamped earth, each tested. If an arrow could penetrate, the entire section was redone. An early report attributed to Li Si says, "When struck, it sounds hollow. When burned, it does not burn. When pierced, nothing enters." That line suggests a sealed outer shell with a huge inner void, possibly lined with non-flammable, non-permeable materials like bronze, stone, or heavy lacquer, a giant underground bunker designed to stay shut. Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian gives a famous description. Workers pierced 3 springs, digging extremely deep. Molten bronze was poured to seal the coffin area. Palaces, offices, and treasures filled the chamber. Mechanical crossbows were set to fire at intruders. Mercury was used to create rivers and seas that flowed by mechanisms. The ceiling was decorated with the heavens, constellations, and stars. The floor represented the land with mountains and rivers. Lamps burned on special oil meant to last for a long time. After burial, multiple yen doors were closed in sequence, trapping workers inside. So, how much of Sima Qian's records are true? Modern science has tested the soil around the mound and did find very high mercury concentrations near the central axis of the tomb, and much lower normal levels in control samples away from the mound. An uneven distribution that seems to resemble coastal versus inland areas on a map of China. This strongly hints that there really is a large quantity of mercury underground. It may indeed be arranged as China map-like rivers and seas, just as described. To accumulate that much mercury, someone had to supply massive amounts of cinnabar, 朱砂. So who provided it? This is also recorded in records of Grand Historian that Ba Widow Qin is a wealthy merchant producing and trading cinnabar and is linked to Qin Shi Huang's tomb due to the massive mercury requirements. As for the ceiling and floor, later Han tombs show starry ceilings and detailed landscape maps. These parallels support the idea that Qin Shi Huang's chamber was a miniature universe. Heaven above, a sky filled with constellations, maybe all 28 lunar mansions. Earth below, rivers, mountains, and the 9 provinces of China back then. The emperor at the exact center. Over time, stories have crystallized into the idea of 6 major trap systems. Firstly, mercury rivers, toxic, volatile, and dangerous if released. Second, flowing sand layers, unstable layers that could collapse under intruders. Third, flipping doors, stone slabs that could tilt or drop victims into pits or blades. Fourth, automatic crossbows, triggered by doors, pressure, or tripwires. 5. Hidden fire, oils and fuels that could ignite in sealed spaces. 6. Psychological curses, not physical traps, but fear and legend as a deterrent. We don't know how many of these are literally real, but we do know the tombs was intentionally designed to be physically, chemically, and psychologically hostile to anyone who tried to break in. For centuries, people have accused Xiang Yu and his 300,000 troops, rebel groups like the Red Eyebrows, warlords like Shi Hu and others, bandits and soldiers in late imperial and republican times of robbing the tomb. But modern evidence points in another direction. The famous bronze chariots were found buried and intact in a side passage beneath the original mound cover. If the core chamber had been repeatedly opened, looted, and burned, such valuable bronzes would likely have been removed or destroyed. Non-robber tunnels, one never reaches the mound. Another stops at the mound's edge, about 9 meters down, far from the underground palace. Earth layers in key passages remain untouched, no signs of large tunneling. Mercury and metal anomalies remain extremely strong in geophysical scans, suggesting the chambers is still sealed and full. So why outer pits, including parts of the Terracotta army, were burned, smashed, or disturbed? The central underground palace appears to be intact and unopened. And that leads to the last question. If it's still sealed and we can see so much using scans, why not just open it for science? In the 1950s, archaeologists fully excavated Dingling, the tomb of Ming Emperor Wanli. At first, it was spectacular. Brilliant silks, lacquerware, woodwork, painted objects, colorful, finely crafted artifacts. But almost immediately after exposure to air, colors faded, silks and organic materials deteriorated, wood and lacquer cracked or warped. Conservation science simply wasn't ready. Within a few years, objects that had survived centuries underground began to fall apart in museums. Two leading scholars wrote to the government warning, "Our technology is not yet sufficient to protect what we uncover. Some tombs should remain closed until future generations are ready." The state adopted a principle that still shapes archaeology today. Do not proactively excavate imperial tombs. Only dig when it is absolutely necessary for rescue or protection. Applied to Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum, that principle becomes even stronger. Firstly, national policy, a giant system, not a single chamber. Excavation in some way is controlled destruction. Technology still has limits, and unknown internal risks like high levels of mercury, possible traps, uncertain structural stability after earthquakes and soil shifts. Geophysical scans show complexities we still don't fully understand. Every day above ground, tourists ride shuttles, walk through museums, and pose beside terracotta warriors. But beneath their feet, the emperor who unified China lies somewhere in a vast dark chamber, surrounded by mercury rivers, bronze chariots, jade ornaments, and secrets untouched for over 2,200 years. His dynasty lasted just 15, but his tomb has remained closed for more than 2,000. In a strange way, he won. So now the last mystery is no longer about him, it's about us. If one day we have the technology to open Qin Shi Huang's tomb without destroying what's inside, should the greatest door in history remain closed? Let me know your answer in the comments. This is Hidden Lantern Chronicles. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story, where another secret waits just below the surface.